Hey there, CS360 students. So in this recording, we're going to walk through Chapter 2 where we get layouts, and then we're going to add different types of widgets to an Android application. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get Android Studio started up here, and I'm going to create a new project that we can kind of just use as a template to place different things in. I'm going to call it Chapter 2 Demo. I'll leave the package name as is. I am saving everything to my Southern New Hampshire CS360 projects folder. I actually have this as a Google Drive directory. Um, that way, if I ever want to switch between different machines, I can do that. I'll use Java, and then I'm going to use version 28. I'll go ahead and click Finish. And as it creates this project and loads things, let's go ahead and start talking about how a Android user interface gets built. So you will be using XML layouts to arrange either the views, the widgets, or the objects that they're going to contain. These are the different types of layouts that are available to you, and we'll talk about each of them as we get going along. What I want you to understand is that a view that appears in a view group is called a child. So if I put a widget inside of a layout, it is a child, and the view group is called the parent. They say that good practice is to minimize the layout's hierarchy depth, so that way it will increase the layout display speed. So how long it takes to render it improves as you have less and less components. So the idea here might be something like this, where we start out with a relative layout, and then we have a button, another button, and then a linear layout that contains some text views. So we would say that these text views are children of the linear layout. These buttons in this linear layout, these are children of the relative layout right here. Uh, Continuing on, regardless of which layout you're using, they all have parameters that let you specify its attributes. So some of the most common attributes that you're going to be utilizing are the width and height attributes. They could be specified in pixels, or we could specify them to either wrap content or match their parent. This wrap content makes it just big enough to be viewed. The match parent is going to fill the entire space as big as its parent is. So you can see here, this is a linear layout, and it has 3 buttons that have been added to it, and you can see that they have been oriented in a vertical fashion. So right here, these would be all vertical. If we didn't specify the vertical orientation right here, it would default to be a horizontal attribute. Continuing on, as far as the height and width, you can see that this first button, they specified in pixels how big they wanted the button to be. This button too uses the wrap content attributes. So this just renders it as big as what the text is going to contain here. The last one here matches the parent attributes. So you can see that it spans the entire width of the screen because it's matching the parent's size. All right, so we just talked about the linear attributes right there. So the linear layouts, again, I can either have a horizontal or a linear vertical size, vertical representation of those. The relative layout arranges things in relation to each other. So let's suppose right here that we have view 1 and view 2. View 1 is a button, and what we could say is we want to align it left of some other view. So this will align it to the left of this view. Or we might align their bottoms, or we might lay out in the center. So lots of different ways to align things if you're using a relative layout. Continuing on, we have a constraint layout, and this constraint layout, what it does is it lets you specify how far from the top and how far from the left something is. So this lets you specify in terms of these 2 constraints where you want to align things. What we'll utilize in our little simple application is we'll utilize a just simple linear layout. We'll just let everything get stacked up vertically right here. So let's go ahead and jump over to our Android application. It should be all loaded by now. And I can open up my project. I like to use the Android view of it. And so there I see the Android manifest. I've got the main activity. If I expand the resources, I can see that I have my activity main XML file. Right here it is. They created it out as a, let me go to the code rendering. So they gave us a constraint layout. I'm going to go ahead and change that to a linear layout here in a second. So I'm going to do this, delete out that constraint, and let's go to the design tab. And for the layouts, I'm going to drag a vertical linear layout to there. So now I can go back to my code, and it should have dragged it. So drag it, put it in there. It's not cooperating, so let's just do this. I'll just copy and paste. I've been having some issues with my Android Studio, kind of being a little grumpy today. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to delete out these other buttons. I'm just going to have one button on there. And that'll be good for right now. So now if I go to my design, I should see, yep, so now I've got a button, it's on there, and I am good to go for right now. Okay, so I've got a linear layout added to my view. Real quick, in section 2.3, they talk about table grid layouts. I'm not familiar with the frame layout. That's one that I have not used. But the table and grid layouts are going to let you lay things out either as a table. So you can see here, this is a table layout. And we add table rows to this layout. And so inside each table row, we can add components to it. So this has just a text view with a please log in. So this is going to display this text. Note that it's got a layout span attribute of 2, so it's going to span both of the columns that we have here. The next row has a username and then an edit text to enter in the text value. And so right here, here's the username text and the text box that will be utilized for it. Copied and pasted with password stuff. And then last one, we have a row with a button in it, and you can see that they specified the column to be 1. So this will place it on the right column right here. So this would be column 0. This is column number 1. Grid layout, very similar, and you can see that they provide the XML for that. And it's very similar ideas where you can specify the layout gravity, so does it need to be centered or to the right? And then you can even see that you can specify which column or if it's going to span multiple columns right there. All right, let's jump ahead to section 2.4 and let's start talking about different widgets that we have inside Android and how to handle when users interact with them. So as you saw, I can go to the XML file, and if I choose the design button, I can see all of the different widgets that are available to us. So I have buttons. So I've got a button right there. We could add different text type of elements. We can add different widgets. If I go to common, I've got an image view. Let me see if I can find where is the radio button. I've got containers. I just hope I can find the radio button relatively easily. I can just search here. So if I type radio, I can get a radio button. If I want a checkbox, I can get a checkbox and so forth. Okay, so you can easily search through the palette for what you might be looking for. Now, once we add our elements to our UI, eventually we might want to interact with them. And Android uses callbacks or listener classes to handle those. The most common type of things that you're going to work with are an on-click listener. So if something is clicked, we're going to handle it in code using an on-click listener. they're going to look something like this. So for instance, we might have a button that we've added to our XML file. They might have called it my button. So let's go ahead and hook up a button. I'm not going to call it my button. I'm going to call it the OK button. So I'm going to call it BTN OK. And so they've got this as button 1. We'll change the text to be just simply OK. So now I can come back into my code here and we can reference that button just like they do right here. So button, I'm going to call it BTN OK equals find view by ID, r.id, and then I can find BTN OK in there. Let's go ahead and include this import, and then it will eventually say, yes, there is a BTN OK in there. Why it's not exactly finding it has been kind of a slow process today. It's been doing that when I was doing a different tutorial earlier today. Once I have my BTN OK created, we can go ahead and set its on click listener. So I'm going to copy in this on click listener. So that's going to go down below. And they called it M button. I'm going to call this my OK button listener. And I'm going to import what needs to be imported. Import the toast. This will just display a pop-up. And that's all cleaning up real good. So btn OK.set on click listener. And I'm going to add the OK button click listener to that. We'll change this to say, hi, CS360. So when I click the OK button, I should get a pop-up with this content. So let's go ahead and run this. Cross your fingers, it'll run the first time. I'm going to have the build window open here. Again, I know it's got a red syntax error there, but I know it's all good. There is BTN OK over there. This might take a little bit of time to run the first time, so I'll be back up when this is running. Okay, so I figured out what my issue was. And so what I did was I went and I just dragged another button here so I could let Android Studio default it. And inside the XML, the attribute for the ID, I needed to use this form right here. Otherwise, it does not get added to the resources. So I'm going to name that properly, and I can get rid of this other button here. So now I've got a BTN OK. And so now it sees it. And so now across your fingers, if I run this, let me rerun it. Again, it's been really grumpy today. Sometimes you have to run things twice for it to run properly. I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. Again, I'll be back when this is up and running. Okay, so my emulator version's up and running. If I click the OK button, I should see this pop up. And there it is. Hi, CS360. Great. This is all working great. So let's go ahead and stop that. Continuing on, we could actually implement the action using what's called an anonymous inner class as well. So instead of actually creating a variable that's an listener, is we could hook it up with a anonymous version. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code right here. And instead of using my variable, I'm going to paste in my new on-click listener right here. And the toast I want to display, I'm going to change this right here. And so now all the action is going to be handled right here. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to delete out this private member variable here. And this is going to function the exact same way where the on-click listener has been added to the button, and when the click button happens, then it's going to display this text. Second time you run something once it's been built is much quicker, so as you can see, this is up and running great. I click OK, and I get hi CS360. One other thing that I like to do is instead of having all the code be inside this onClick handler, I would create a method called handle OK button. And that's going to handle all of the code inside my OK button. And then in here, I'm going to handle OK button. I'm just going to make that call to the method. One thing I like about the IntelliJ is it will pop up things that are helpful in yellow. And it's telling me that I can replace this with a Lambda statement. So in Java 8 and beyond, I can use a Lambda. So you can see that this is simplified it down to a Lambda where it takes a view and passes it this method right here. So a much cleaner implementation, and then it's going to be handled down here. So cross your fingers, this should all work just fine. I'm going to get my high CS360. And there is my toast message. Okay, great. All right, so one other way we could do this is we could add a click attribute in the XML. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it like this, but I could have added it in XML as well. All right, so in section 2.5, you can see we've already added a regular old button. If we wanted to, we could add an icon to the button. You can see that it is adding a drawable from the drawable resources, so that would have to be inside that directory. You could place it on the left or the right. Or if I wanted to just give it an image and turn it into a button, I can use an image button. Again, this icon would have to be inside the drawable resources. Regardless of the implementation, these are all going to have the exact same attributes where I can then handle their action using an on-click listener. Another fun thing, if you wanted to add a floating action button or an FAB for short, you would need to make sure that you're using the material design. My default implementation, if I go to the Android manifest, nope, not the Android manifest, my build.gradle, this one, it already has material up in there. So if I run the application, oh, which guy are you? You're this guy. This is a material form of the theme. It's just a nice flat and simple design. But this floating action button, you can add it, and then it's going to be rendered something like this. Again, it will need to have a image associated with it. And then you can just simply handle its action just like a regular old button. Okay, let's move on to some text widgets. So if we want to display text to the user, we use a text view. And it has lots of different attributes, just like a button. We can get its text property. We can change the color, size, styling. Every widget inside an Android UI has a lot of these different attributes. So if you ever want to change what something looks like, just Google the attribute that you want to change. What I want to do is I want to put a text view on here that we can display some text to. So let's go to the XML file. I'll go to design, and I'm going to grab a text view, and I'm going to place it at the top. And let's go to the XML of it, and here I can see it added my text view. It is above my button, and I'm going to call this LBL output. So while it's called a text view, in C# or Java, we usually call these labels for output. So I'm going to call it an LBL output. So now I've got something I can display some text to. So let's go to our main activity and let's get that label and display text to it. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do text view LBL output. So I'm going to declare it up here. I need to import it. And here's all those imports that have happened so far. Keep the code clean. If it's not being used or referenced, delete it. And so I'm going to declare it here so I can reference it in multiple places. So I need to initialize it. So equals find view by ID, r.id. I called it LBL output. There it is. Great. So now it has been created. I got an extra parentheses that I don't need. And so right here, not only are we going to display some a pop-up, but we could also set our text to something like, "Hi, CS360." This will clean up, so I'm going to do a build. Let me go ahead and just run it. It's probably going to crash out first time. Yep. But let me rerun it. And it should clean up. Again, my Android Studio has kind of been a little wonky today. Okay, so you can see right there is the text view. I click OK, and I get my toast message, and you can see that it displayed the text right there. Oh, by the way, we could remove out this text right here, so we probably don't want it to be there, so we would remove that. Okay, so now that we have a text view that we can display output to, let's go ahead and add to our little app. Let's add it an edit text field that lets us get text from the user. So we can add an edit text, and they point out that you can specify the input types, if it's going to be an email address or a password or a number. This will just set the keyboard to whatever format you need it to be. So let's go ahead and add a plain text, edit text here. So I'm going to put that at the very top. And if it didn't get added, that's okay. We can figure it out in the actual code. So I've got an edit text right there. It is. And I'm going to call this txt name. So we're going to enter in a person's name right there. And as far as input type, we're going to just leave this to be width, height, and the attribute txt name. Where it says name right here, again, I'm going to get rid of the initial text. And all I want is just a simple edit text field. So let's go to our main activity. Let's go ahead and reference that edit text. I'll call it txt name. We'll need to do the import. And so let's handle that down here. So let's say string name equals txt name dot get text. And I got a typo. Let's get that fixed. So it's telling me that the get text needs to be wrapped using a string value of. So this get text returns an editable, and I need to turn that into a string. Let's go ahead and concatenate out here. So let's say hi CS360 from, and we will get that name right there. So same thing here. And we'll append the name that we get out of that text field. So let's go ahead and rerun this. I should see a edit text that I can enter into. So let me minimize that. Rerun it again. I've been having some strange issues where it's not running properly the first time. All right, so now I can type in a name. So we'll type in Joe Jones. I click OK, and I can see, oops, something crashed. It didn't show me that it crashed. Let me try rerunning that. So I have something crashing on me. Typically, I would see the output maybe in the run menu. Here we go. So get text. So, oh, I know what I did. So it's telling me that it was a null object reference. Yeah, that's because I didn't do this. I got to do a find view by ID r.id.txt name. There we go. Now, when I rerun this thing, I'll be able to type in a name and I will see it in my toast as well as in that output label. And there we go. So I can see that I have my toast. I can see it in the label, and that is working just fine. Okay, so the next thing to look at are widgets for selecting options. So they provide the toggle buttons, the switch that you can turn things on and off with. These would be great for settings. I'm going to continue down. They've got some radio buttons that I might want to put in there. So a radio button, let's say user just simply choose one particular value. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right here. So they've got a radio group that contains the radio buttons. And I'll go into my XML and I will put that above my button. And this is depending on some strings, yes and no. So I'll go ahead and go to the resources, values, strings file. Let's go ahead and add in a string for yes. There's yes. And then we'll add in no. So there's no, and it will have no contained in it. So now that's all cleaned up. You can see that they're going to go ahead and add in on radio button clicked handler for that. So I'll go ahead and just copy that code. And then I don't have to add that inside my Java code. So right here, so this is going to handle the on radio button clicked events. So both of these have it. And let's just do some code. We'll do this. String selected. That's got to be a capital S. And we can do selected equals. I'll just hard code in a yes for now. I could reference the string. Maybe we'll do that here in a little bit. Otherwise, this is no. And then we'll go ahead and do a toast. And I'll just copy this code right here. And we'll just display selected. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this. So as I click my radio buttons, I'm either going to get yes or no displayed in the toast window. So there's no. It'll change out to yes. Should have changed out to yes. So what is, so that only gives me that one. Let's debug this, see what's going on here. So to debug it, I'm going to put a breakpoint right in here and I'm going to debug. We should have separate names for those. That's radio yes, that's radio no, so that's all correct. And let's go ahead and click one of these. And so now you can see I can step over my code here. So let's step over. So selected was no. Okay, so selected contains no, so that is going to be correct. So I'm going to continue. When I hit yes, step over. So selected is yes. Oh, I see what the issue is. See how we didn't exit out of this case right there? That's what we get for copying and pasting code. Hopefully, all of you are screaming at the screen that I was missing my break statements. So now when I rerun this thing, now it's going to be handled properly. So there's no, and there's our yes. Okay, great, fantastic. So that's an example where we could handle the radio buttons on click event. Kind of a more straightforward example might be something like this, where let's go ahead and declare those radio buttons. So radio button RAD yes, radio button RAD no. And let's go ahead and import those. And let's get those found properly this time. So RAD yes equals find view by ID r.id dot radio yes, and then radio button no. And so what we might want to do down here is we can then identify which one was chosen and then potentially handle that particular case. Why is it not like that? There we go. So I'm going to copy this exact same structure, and I need the view. No, I don't need that view anymore. I'm going to do this. If rad yes dot selected, so if yes is selected, else if, and yes, I know that I only have two of them, but I'll just hook it up this way. So now I don't need this switch. I'm going to get rid of that. And so now I can come in here and I can check to see if yes was selected and handle it. If no was selected, I can handle it. And we could go ahead and just append that however we wanted to. Okay. Again, we already know that's going to work as we saw it earlier. So that would be how I would be using this radio button chose idea. Another example of something that you might want to use would be checkboxes. So checkboxes are when you want a single element to be able to be selected. So if I want biking or reading or other, so let's go ahead and just add these into our XML. So here's my radio button group. Let's go ahead and put these in here. So we see that we have these. There's biking, reading, and others. So let's go ahead and add those. Let me see if it'll let me, will it let me create this? Create it. And this would be biking. Create it. This is reading. And create it. This is other. Awesome. So it lets me create those and add it to my string XML file. All right, great. So now I'm going to do just a little bit of renaming. I'm going to call this CHK biking. I'm going to call this CHK reading, and then this will be CHK other. All right, great. So I've got some checkboxes on there. Let's go add those to the mix. So checkbox, CHK reading, checkbox, CHK biking, and checkbox, CHK other. Let's get the import statement. And great, let's get those referenced as well. So CHK reading equals find view by ID. And I'm going to copy and paste, and I'll do the other two. So biking, and then other. Great, so now I've got those referenced, and it should eventually clean up. And so now I can come in here and say if chk reading dot is selected, and I can do based on, you know, reading was selected. I can do whatever I want here. And then I would do if chk, these are all separate if statements. And again, I do whatever I want based on biking having been selected, okay? Continuing on, those are the main ones I wanted to go through here. We also have spinners that we can use. And the spinner ID, I'll let you kind of chew on this one. This is going to be a drop-down menu, and you provide it an array of items that you choose from, okay? So I'll let you kind of chew on this one. We're not going to worry about that one for right now. Kind of closing out, we have an image view. So if you want to display an image in your UI, they provide the XML for that, and then you can set it in code. Again, you have to use the resources. It has to already be an image in there. You could also use vector instead of just images. Again, I'll let you kind of go through all of that stuff on your own. And then last thing, if you wanted to specify styling and themes for everything, they walk you through that in here. So you can specify a style in the resources and then apply it to all of your UI elements. Same thing with the theming. So you can specify what kind of theme you want to use inside the styles as well. So again, lots of different things that you can handle with there. Okay, so that's it for this recording. I'll talk to you next time.